AI, Work and Wellbeing. Ever since the Industrial Revolution of the late 17th century, we have regularly seen technological changes that have wrought social upheaval. Even as late as the early 20th century, most Americans were employed in agriculture. Now, not even 11% are. Does, it, does this mean that 89% are unemployed? Well, no. Not only has mechanization reduced the need for as many farmers, but between the fact that industrial workers are required to manufacture agricultural machinery and that we have become sufficiently productive to create new industries in large other economic sectors, think retail, services, and education, but also to create new sectors and to provide an extensive social safety net. Of course, all this came at a price. The skills required for farming in the early 20th century did not always translate to the new economic realities and would not work at all in the 21st century agriculture. One could see the same thing repeated from the 1950s through the 1980s, when automation replaced jobs that ranged from clerical to industrial. If the past is prologue, then, why should we think that life under AI will be any different? One difference might be the number and types of jobs that could be eliminated by AI and what new jobs might look like. According to recent reports from the International Monetary Fund, about 40% of jobs globally could be affected by AI, with some economies, such as those in the US, perhaps seeing up to 60% of jobs impacted by AI. Unlike the past, the affected jobs will be those in creative fields, those fields that hitherto had seemed to be essentially human endeavors. Journalism, literature, the arts, medicine, finance, education, and more will be affected. Whether you are talking about deep fakes, AI generated art, news feeds, or any other creative practice, it is likely that AI will be able to do your job. AI productivity may outstrip an economy's ability to create new occupations. There is also no assurance that any of these newly created fields will demand the creative effort deemed so essentially human. Looking at the skill sets that are involved, what would be the value in an AI-driven economy? Here is where Sandel's criticism of a pure meritocracy comes into play. Things that were once valued, that people strive to master, are no longer as valuable. Does that mean that the people who obtained those now obsolete skills are less valuable? How then is the common good to be maintained? So let us look at what we value. Society often provides honors to particular occupations, and this tends to translate into some sort of monetary remuneration. Kokelberg suggests that if AI provides a situation where society is so productive that productivity per person exceeds the economy's capacity to create jobs for everyone, then we will need to find some way to decouple work from income, for instance, in a guaranteed minimum income. This could be financed by taxing those oh-so-productive AIs. Those who object that this would encourage some sort of laziness ignore the fact that there currently isn't any real connection between how hard one works and how richly one is compensated. A world in which we had more freedom to explore our avocations would not be all that bad, nor would a world where honor was measured by something other than a paycheck. However, whatever occupation we do come to must be seen as meaningful. A more realistic objection would be that machines have long been promised to increase leisure, but so far automation, while providing some degree of leisure time, have typically been used and deployed to make workers more productive. An alternative would be that we simply decide that there are some jobs that AI won't do, even if it could. One of the things the Hollywood actors and writers struck over was protection against AI images of actors being used or scripts being written by AI. Whether we can maintain that stance in a consumer-driven market is another matter. Sandel insists that to establish justice, we must come together and wrestle with arriving at the common good, establishing some grounding set of things that we value and agreed means to obtain them. Kohlberg has some reservations about the possibility of establishing some sort of eudaimonia. The first is that AI and social media have already contributed to the fragmentation of society. The vast amount of information available and algorithms that drive to use to simply reinforce prior commitments and objectifying those with whom we disagree work against attempting to find any common ground across diverse communities. A second worry Kohlberg voices is the speed at which change within a society assisted by AI may well outstrip any deliberative process that is required for a rational consideration, establishing what eudaimonia might look like. As mentioned earlier, when we looked at ethics in general and justice in particular with Sandel, it was from a humanist perspective. That is to say, from the perspective of treating value and meaning as something that originates from being human. However, Kohlberg wants us to have a more universal view of ethics. Arguments that we deal with problems of global warming, environmental degradation, and species diversity often revolve around our actions in these areas as they affect us as human beings. Some argue, for instance, that the rainforest must be safe because oxygen that they provide or their possible pharmacological value. We must address climate change because not doing so will make life extremely difficult for future generations of humans. Food production will suffer. Coastal areas will suffer, including major commercial and metropolitan centers. Drastic changes in the climate will greatly increase worldwide political instability. That is, climate change is bad for us as human beings. This is, however, a calculated argument. If we can determine how bad the situation is for us, we might make a cost-benefit analysis and conclude that climate change, while not optimal, is more acceptable than the alternatives. Left out of the discussion is whether all of the other species who don't have any say in the matter have any inherent value, or whether the beauty of the natural world has any value beyond our evaluation of it. Is it possible that our obsession with AI in the face of changes that environmental degradation will bring is simply misplaced, and misplaced because we treat AI as a human artifact that can be used to solve human problems? Can AI be used as a means to solve problems that arise from climate change? For instance, could we use AI to manage our economies, our consumer habits, our industrial policies in such a way as to mitigate CO2 and methane emissions? Would we even permit such a thing? And what would such an AI try to maximize? Would it try to, for instance, protect species diversity only to the extent that doing so is useful to human beings, or recommend actions that greatly disrupt some local environments for the sake of the larger human population? More conservatively, we could use AI to model certain outcomes, much as we do now. We already use climate models and can predict outcomes based on certain assumptions about how nations change behaviors and policies. It would be up to us to make the decisions. The question still remains, do we act simply out of a calculation of what we perceive is best for our species, as if human beings are ultimately what really matters, or do we extend our essential concern beyond ourselves? Before we go too far in seeing the benefits of deploying AI in the cause of climate change, we need to note that AI, as it is used now, is a contributor to climate change. AI is extremely energy intensive. We don't see it, but the computing resources needed for just our current use of AI is much greater than any comparable information technology application. AI is a comparatively small player in the information technology field now, but it is projected to dominate IT. Google has already had to push back its carbon neutral plans because of the new focus on AI. The rate of adoption of renewable resources will not keep up the pace with the projected demands that are being made by AI, which leaves fossil fuels. Again, the forces fueled by AI that make arriving at the common good more difficult also poses issues for arriving at a single plan of action. Even if all agree that the AI models and the assumptions are correct, and the opaque nature of deep learning may throw any model into dispute, which option is to be preferred would be based on competing values. What Kuckelberg suggests is twofold. First, change our focus from human beings as the source of value and meaning and see the larger world as having an inherent value. Doing so leads to a second point, simply to slow down. In particular, begin by formulating workable policies, by taking a bottom-up approach, by taking in consideration all the stakeholders, rather than formulating general AI policies or pronouncements from above. We don't have time to look at those particular sections of his book, but I do encourage you to read them after the semester is over.